Braverman wants Farage to come into the Tory party. When they go centre, and she's using words like liberal because she's so politically illiterate. A liberal in this country is not the opposite of a conservative. It is in America. She's speaking the wrong political language. The Tories have always been liberals, and that's the whole point of them socially. She will go into reform. When they go centre, she won't be able to stand it, and I think Braverman will join the reform lot, and I think she'll probably take some of her right-wing nutters with her.
I'm going to start with change then. In the first week of Sir Keir Starmer's premiership, he's given us the most state-educated cabinet ever, decided to build on the green belt and abolish the phrase levelling up. Confident, competent, or is he missing his opportunity? Let's ask Giles Coren. What do you think? I mean, you want him to be your mate, don't you? But what do you think of your would-be mate? Has he done well in the first 5 days, Giles?
Oh, I don't know. Didn't Esther kind of? I think Esther was on yesterday. Was that with you? Kind of like trying to scale down this whole mate thing. She's really embarrassed with it.
She did a really good job of it actually yesterday.
But what do you think? That's what we want to know.
Well, I mean, like, no, I'm just being silly. It's a thing that's got going between me and Stig now, where I'm mates with everybody, isn't it? And I'm really hoping, there's my mate Kemi versus my mate Keir. And I'm just trying to get involved. But
who wouldn't want to be friends with the Prime Minister, whoever that Prime Minister is? I mean, come on, let's be, that's the name of all names to drop.
I suppose so. I don't know. I became mates with Cameron only afterwards and stuff, and he seemed like a decent chap. Listen, I don't know. To be honest, whenever I've met Keir, he's a bit sort of glassy-eyed and dull. But I'm not going to say that, and he's too busy to listen now. I wouldn't have said it when he was in opposition. But I mean, I've got to say, like, looking at him on the front of the Times today, and I don't have particularly emotional responses to not like I think Catelyn Moran writing in the paper that she felt it made her feel randy or something that the Labour had got in. But I looking at the front at Keir and getting out of the plane on the front of the Times with his box in his lovely suit and his gorgeous wife with her lovely white dress and sort of not too much makeup on, and that you could see the little Union Jack on the side of the plane. I felt very, very excited about it all, and I'm not excited about the fact that he's thrown out the public school boys, because I'm one of them. I don't care. He's got 97% comprehensive kids. That doesn't excite me particularly. They're the ones who used to mug me for my tea money on the way to private school. So I'm not that excited about it. But he seems so confident and sort of foursquare and excellent and a tiny bit taller than Rishi that I'm quite bubbly for it. Although I'm sure I'll be voting him out in 5 years' time.
Oh, there we go. Bubbly for it. Ashley Frawley, what have you made of the first 5 days?
Well, I think one thing that we can be certain of is that the new House of Commons is diverse in terms of race, gender, and sexuality. And we're sure of that because it's the thing that Starmer seemed most keen to highlight in the first parliamentary speech. And commentary has been all over this as well, praising the diversity of the cabinet, especially Rachel Reeves becoming the first female chancellor of the Exchequer. I actually think it would be a lot more progressive if the fact that the gender balance is 46% women was just incidental to people actually doing their jobs. I think it's actually a little bit insulting that the most interesting thing to praise about Reeves, for example, is her biology, not her aptitude for doing the job. And obviously, too, like the Conservatives, they were a pretty diverse bunch themselves, but none of that seemed to matter. There's actually a really good satirical piece in The Critic by, the character Titania McGrath, where she says that race, gender, and sexuality is actually determined by our political affiliations and how we choose to vote. And that seems particularly clear when all of a sudden all of these things are triumphs instead of a reason to call people Uncle Tom, which was what we saw with the last government.
He's very lucky, Keir Starmer, Ashley, because he's got this, he's got the international meetings of all international meetings in his first week. I mean, he's a lucky man.
It's very interesting because we have both parties are desperate not to drop the ubiquitous Ming vase that they're both trying just so hard not to mess anything up. The American Party is trying very hard not to smell anyone's hair or forget lines or get lost on the stage. And Starmer's trying very, very hard not to ruffle any feathers, because that's been the order of the day. Just, don't make anyone angry. And so it'll be interesting to see both of them carry a vase across a slippery floor.
Yeah.
Well,
go on.
I mean, I think the main advice to Keir is don't give the bloody vase to Biden, isn't it? I mean, it's like, don't worry, you just stand there and tremble.
Oh.
I wouldn't give him a sort of chipped tea mug. A Ming vase is literally not the thing for the poor old boy.
But Giles, you know that we've been talking about defence this morning, and obviously some of the Conservatives are not happy that that Keir Starmer is not going to give us a kind of a full timetable today. He's not going to commit to telling us exactly when defence spending is going to go back up to 2.5%. Do you think that he has every right actually to say, yes, we're going to have yet another defence review, and once I've done that, then I can tell you? Or do you think he should just get on with it?
No, I think it's absolutely perfectly fair for him to have a defence review. He can't do the first thing he does can't be to just start spending money without thinking about it, whatever it's on. But I absolutely do believe him. It's 5 years ago we were quite close to having a Jeremy Corbyn government, and he would have slashed defence spending, and we're lucky to have someone who takes it seriously. I certainly wouldn't. I mean, he's the king bean counter, and he's got to count his beans before he starts tossing them out.
Let's move on to the Tories, because they're not important in any constitutional sense anymore, but they are interesting because stuff is happening. The psychodrama of failure is always intriguing to people. There's a great story by Steve Swinford on the front of the Times today about what Kemi Badenoch said to her shadow cabinet colleagues in the meeting. She concluded by saying, "Do not leak what I've just said." They leaked it immediately to Steve Swinford. She said her former cabinet colleague Suella Braverman was having a public nervous breakdown. Rishi Sunak's decision to call an election bordered on unconstitutional, and she described the former MP who bet on the election date as a buffoon. The Tories have got to find a new leader, but actually they've probably got to find themselves first of all, don't they? They need to work out what they are. We had Miriam Cates on earlier with Rachel McLean, and the point is, are they a party that believes in the Rwanda policy and being very tough on migration and fighting a culture war? Or are they a party that believes not in that, in the international rule of law, being closer to the Liberal Democrats than they are to reform? Is it possible for them to pick a side? Or by picking a side, do they become too small? What do you think is going on here, Ashley?
Yeah, are they a party that believes in anything at all? That's a good question. Yeah, so the line in the brief was Conservatives seem to be going into meltdown. Oh, wow, shock. No surprise. The Tories have been going into meltdown since they were dragged kicking and screaming into Brexit. They obviously needed this time to regroup. They couldn't get out of government fast enough. But the shambles of the party really reflect something deeper in the Tories' political disorientation. They found themselves this unlikely and uneasy voice of the working class after decades of this weird political realignment. And, this led them to saying whatever, they obviously had the dimmest view of the electorate. They're like, wow, all those racists voted for us. Gosh, what do we do now? We'll just say the most awful things possible because that's what those gammons want. Like, oh, am I allowed to say that? Is that a bad word?
You can say
I'm
that.
too
It's fun.
I'm too Canadian, right? I'm not sure what a
Say what you
slur.
like. We believe in free speech here. All right. You're using it satirically. It's okay.
16 years in this country, and I should know better. But anyway, this led them to just saying, whatever they thought the dim view of the electorate wanted them to say. And this has led them to completely lack a political compass. And they need this time to recover. But it just seems like they're all jostling for positions and bickering with each other, which has been, I think a project of deferral from the sort of deeper soul searching that really needs to go on.
I guess the fear is, though, that because they wheel out the broad church cliche, but that isn't true anymore. They clearly aren't a broad church. They're clearly at least two opposing worldviews trying to live along with each other. I guess the thing they fear the most, actually, is if they split into two sets of unified worldviews, neither one of those things will be big enough to get them back in power. If they're too liberal, they'll have to share the world with the centrists of Labour and the centrists of Lib Dem. And if they're too right-wing, there might not be enough right-wing voters out there. And if they are, they might split them between Reform and the Conservatives. And therefore, they might have unity, but not enough quantity. And that must be their great fear.
Yeah, I think the idea that it's a broad church was just a way of excusing themselves from their blatant opportunism. We'll have a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But at the same time, I think one of the scariest lessons that I don't think anyone has learned was that if they actually did try to unify, which is necessary to get anything done, this is the same problem that Labour is having at the moment, where they're trying so hard not to mess anything up, and they've come into power on a negative vote. That is just, people voting against the Tories, not because they were particularly lit up by what Labour was offering. That means that if they actually try to enact any serious and far-reaching change, their hands are pretty much tied, because they're just trying not to ruffle any feathers. And this is the same, and oddly, this is the same kind of situation that the Tories are in, because when you had, the quite famous disastrous budget, that was a real sign that of a lack of democracy, that when they actually did, now whatever you think of that disastrous mini budget, they actually tried to do something really far reaching.
Yeah.
And everybody, and it was like the markets were revolting. Well, do we live in a democracy, or do we live at the hands of, markets and internal squabbles within a party? So this is the real issue.
I mean, it wasn't a democracy in the sense of she'd had a no mandate from the electorate to do that anyway. I mean,
that's true. That's true. But you have to think, like, was it at the same time, if you actually try to do something and you don't have the electorate behind you, because you, first of all, because you're on a negative vote, or because you just slid into power in some way, but also because you're being held to ransom by markets. I mean, I don't think anybody in this country has learned that lesson. That there will not be any, if you actually really want to have a guiding political ideology, you probably can't. So now you just play this silly game where politics doesn't mean anything, and just try not to say anything. And, hopefully your position will be secure, and you just get mad when you lose your seat because somebody messed up at a D-Day celebration.
Yeah, I guess the question is, can you, within the margin of safety, still do interesting things? That'll be the test for Labour. Without being super radical, can they still affect clear change? And the question, that will be a judgment that will have to be made over the next 5 years. Giles, do you have a sense of what the Conservative... But when we look at these leaders, and the leadership contest is up there, Kemi clearly knows she's very much liked by certain people who like strong opinions, well expressed. But is there a sense of they need to work out what being a Conservative is? Is it being cuddly and Jeremy Hunt-like and a bit Lib Dem, or is it being a headbanger like Suella Braverman? And can it be both? Is there any world in which you can join those two branches of the party again, or are they forever shorn apart?
Well, it was always meant to be an alliance, and they used to call them sort of wets and one nation against Eurosceptics, and they were called, or John Major called them bastards, which is probably completely apt. So I don't think you should necessarily look for an alliance. You bring back the Ming vase. I mean, Boris, they carried the Ming vase for a little while, and then Boris hurled it on the porcelain floor and smashed it and jumped up and down into weeny little pieces. And now what the Conservative Party are trying to do is to sort of gradually glue this absolutely shattered thing, which whatever they do with it, I could take this analogy a long way. Whatever they do with it, it's going to look like a Ming vase, but it's going to be feathered with these cracks. But then you could think of that Japanese thing, and I don't remember the name of it. But you know how the Japanese will mend one of their Ming vases or whatever with gold paint, so that you can see the things and you celebrate the differences between you. I think I've gone too far with that, but that's broadly what the Tories have to do. Do
they have to do that, or will they do that? I mean, because maybe they shouldn't do. Maybe they shouldn't do that, Giles. Maybe because they can't actually be popular if they're always trying to do that.
Well, I tell you what's going to happen is that a moderate's going to get elected. It'll probably be cleverly. So Hunt's not going to stand. And what will happen, which people are talking about, Braverman wants Farage to come into the Tory party when they go centre. And she's using words like liberal because she's so politically illiterate. A liberal in this country is not the opposite of a Conservative. It is in America. She's speaking the wrong political language. The Tories have always been liberals, and that's the whole point of them socially. She will go into reform. When they go centre, she won't be able to stand it. And I think Braverman will join the reform lot. And I think she'll probably take some of her right-wing nutters with her, but not Kemi, who's, I would happily, she is a right-wing nutter, but she's always said she would never accept Farage into the party. So I think they'll split more. It's a bizarre thing when the Tories are so small. Who could split such a tiny party? I think and really hope that they literally go into reform, and reform ends up with about sort of 10 or 15 defectors, the real hard right. And then the Tories can get on with being the centrist party that they ought to be. The problem that Kemi's had with this "please don't leak it" is Kemi is sadly still. She's so young and enthusiastic and just wants to speak her mind, and so believes in the plain speaking. She's sort of a bit too trusting and not very canny yet.
Unless she wanted it. I mean, that's very generous of you, Giles. Maybe she actually wanted it to be leaked, I wonder.
I don't know the thing about Sunak actually with wanting. I love the fact that she's saying that Braverman's having a nervous breakdown, because, as you know, Stig, Esther's always telling me when I'm trying to reply to antagonists online or whatever, the one thing that a man is never, ever allowed to do is call a woman mad. We have to not do it. And I've learned that you never say that a woman is mad or use words like hysterical, which obviously comes from the Greek for womb. You never attribute a woman's action in public discourse to anything mental. But Kemi can. So we all may think that Suella Braverman is a mad, hysterical woman having a public breakdown. The wonderful thing is that Kemi said that, and it's out there and it can't be put back in.
Alison has got in touch to say, the Japanese repair with gold, it's called kintsugi. Says Alison, well done. We've got very clever listeners.